Welcome back. These are Idea Cellular's Q4 earnings, which are flashing for you on your screen. Prima facie, this looks like a better than expected numbers. So at least on the bottom line, the company has delivered 575 crores. So that beats our expectations by nearly 10%. So after Bharati's beat, it looks like Idea's numbers too are looking quite good. With respect to the EBITDA, the company has reported an EBITDA of 3,600 crore. That would result in EBITDA margins of 38.1%, and that too is significantly better than what we were anticipating. Our poll was at 34.9, so at 38.1, it's a beat compared to our expectations by 320 basis points. So these are looking like a very solid set of earnings from Idea Cellular. Top line has come in line with expectations, a little bit of a beat, so that too is a tick mark. So revenues at 9,484 crore imply a growth of 5.2% on a quarter-on-quarter basis, and this is the highest growth that we've seen from Idea, at least in the last 5 or 6 quarters. Margin improvement is a key positive, and I think this would be the highest margins that we've seen at least in the last maybe about 2 or 3 years, because from at least F5 13, so 13, 14, 15 and now 16, we haven't seen margins this high. So the margin performance is looking exceedingly good at 38.1%, and that is looking like a clear beat, and that is driving into the profitability as well. So profits are higher than consensus expectations by a good 10-odd%. These are the only 3 numbers that I have. So let's get in Prakash Diwan into the discussion. Prakash, the last 3 quarters have been a bit of a miss for Idea Cellular, but these numbers are looking exceedingly good, 38.1% at the EBITDA level.
It's an absolute wow of a number, Rima, because as you rightly said, Idea was always struggling, in terms of the kind of margins that we were expecting. And remember one thing, that while this has been a good quarter, even for the other player, that Bharati, these numbers are a fair bit beat as compared to that. And more importantly, for Idea itself to have improved on its base in a market environment which was supposed to be getting tougher, I think it's commendable. And that was exactly reflected in the price as well. If you see the kind of move it has been making in the last 2 weeks, and even today at a day when there was so much of volatility and a complete sell-off of sorts, Idea was kind of standing tall. So I think the numbers very clearly will hearten a lot of people, and this also sets a way forward where you would start expecting improvement over this base for Idea. It would not just be one-off. I'm sure this is much more of a trend change for the company.
Okay, so let me run our viewers through the key reason why the margins have improved so much by nearly 350 basis points on a quarter-on-quarter basis. That's because Idea's pricing has improved. Idea's revenue per minute or realization or pricing has declined for 6 straight quarters now, and now the company has managed to reverse that trend and show an improvement. So voice revenue per minute has gone up by 4.72%. After 6 quarters of a decline, the pricing has improved this quarter for voice, and even for data, it's been 4 quarters of a decline, and this time it's a growth of 2.7%. Any improvement in realization or pricing straight away flows through into at the operating level, which is why you've seen such a big jump in the company's margins. But the only worry that I have is that the company's volumes have declined significantly. So the company's volume growth is only 1.2%, and this would compare with Idea's volume growth of close to about 6%. So the question is, while it's good that the company is showing you some pricing discipline, is it coming at the expense of volumes? Because volume growth has significantly slowed down. Just to give you a reference, in Q4 of last year, the company's volume growth was close to about 8.4%. In Q4 of the year before that, that's Q4 FY 14, the volume growth was at 8.6%. So typically, this is a seasonally strong quarter for the company, and volumes are generally high. But this time, it slowed down sharply to 1.2% at the voice level. So while the pricing has improved, and that is a key highlight and positive, the question is it coming at the expense of volumes, and is it going to hurt the volume growth? Because 1.2% for volumes is not good, and it compares with 6% that Bharati has clocked in. I think even the data volume growth, let me try getting that up for you on your screen, that too was significantly lower than what we've seen in the prior quarter. So that figure should also be. So that's the only big worry that I have is with respect to the volumes. Let's get in Gaurang Shah of Geojit BNP Paribas. Gaurang, while it's good that the company's margins and profits beat expectations, would you worry about the slowdown seen in the volumes?
First of all, I think great set of numbers, both by Bharti Airtel as well as Idea. And over the last couple of quarters, I think these are some great set of numbers, and possibly it should set a trend going forward from here on. These numbers, keeping in mind the kind of constraint and high competitive environment that the cellular service provider companies have to live into, I think it's first of all commendable. And secondly, yes, little bit of degrowth on the volumes front. It is definitely raising some eyebrows. But I hope the management and the company have strategies in place to resolve this downtick in terms of volumes and have a growth-oriented trajectory going forward from here on. My only worry is that how are they going to grow going forward from here on, keeping in mind one of the most toughest competition coming in form of Reliance Jio, as and when we have the commercial operations getting rolled out.
Okay, let's just give our viewers one more internal, and that is the data growth. So data growth is a paltry 1.5% on a quarter-on-quarter basis, and that is a big miss. Just to put it in context, exactly a year ago, the data volume growth was at 18%, and this quarter it's come down to 1.5%. Even the data volumes, if you look at it on a year-on-year basis, is only 50%, and this is a company which used to see 100% data volume growth. So clearly, the slowdown in data is a big worry. We saw that in the case of Idea as well, where the data volume growth slowed down to 10% on a quarter-on-quarter basis, but for Idea it slowed down to 1.5% versus 12.5% growth that we saw just in the prior quarter, and close to about 30% growth that we used to earlier see. So 1.5% growth in data is paltry compared to the base that incumbents are sitting on. So that is a big miss, and that seems to be a bit of an industry worry as well, because data growth has been subpar for Bharti and even more so for Idea Cellular. So on that, we need some question marks. So just to quickly get our viewers through, to summarize the numbers, revenue growth for the company has come in at 5.2% on a quarter-on-quarter basis. This is better than the 4.8% that we were anticipating. Margins have been the complete surprise element. So margins at 38.1% have improved by 340 basis points on a quarter-on-quarter basis, beating consensus expectations by over 300 basis points. And the key reason for the margin improvement is the increase that we've seen in realization of pricing, both in voice as well as in data. Voice pricing has gone up by 4.7%, while data pricing has gone up by 2.7%. But this increase in pricing is coming at the expense of volumes, and volume growth for Bharti, both on voice as well as data, is only 1.2 and 1.5% respectively, significantly lower than what we've seen in the case of Idea. So that's the chart which you should focus on. Airtel volume growth at 6%, Idea was only at 1.2%. Prakash, you want to come in on this, moderation that we've seen in volumes?
No, absolutely. As you said, this is the key pain point that everybody is going to be watching as an industry. I'll tell you, and let me explain why there are profits improvement in EBITDA in spite of lower volumes. Of course, pricing is one of the components, but the other thing that has favored Idea, and that was a conscious decision that, if you recall, in the last quarter, after the numbers Mr. Kapania had actually shared with the street, they would not want to grow with the kind of discounting that was available in the market, and especially prepaid comes at very significant good volume growth, but not too much of pricing power. They've taken that off quite a bit, and the focus is now on getting much more deeper into some of these circles where they have leadership and maintain that in anticipation of the Rail Jio launch. So what Idea and Bharti typically are doing is they're fortifying their areas of strength, and making sure that at least they don't get vulnerable on those areas, rather than stretch themselves thin by expanding into low pricing, high volume kind of growth, which makes them very, very vulnerable to competition, which can also come with predatory pricing. That's one. The second thing is the A&P cost. If you recall, in the last one quarter, the JFM quarter, Idea has been very low profile on advertisements. You've really not seen much of spend, which usually is about 5 to 6% of its total cost component. That basket of expense has that 5-6%, and telecom companies are huge spenders on A&P. This time around, that's saved. That's been a saving for them. So that's the other reason why I think the EBITDA margins look much healthier. So I would be only concerned if this was not a strategic move to kind of bring down, low price, low high volume kind of a thing. but it's a conscious decision. As Gaurang said, there should be a strategic intent which has done this, and in that case, it's good enough. But if it's happened because by virtue of the industry getting into a shrinkage of sorts, then it's a worry for everybody, including Idea. But
it's not that the industry is shrinking, right? Bharti's volumes is looking superior to that of Idea. So
no, that's what I'm saying. The percentage growth that Bharti's clocked has been significant because they've been very aggressive in that side, where Idea is not. So if you see diametrically this time around, the high decibel advertising that Bharti has had, particularly on the 4G side with all its ad campaigns everywhere, has been much more. So I believe that would have helped them in terms of volume growth. Idea has taken a slightly low profile kind of a growth curve, but they've deepened their presence in the channels in terms of where they are very strong. Certain circles where Idea is the number one player or the number two player, they would probably fortify that rather than go after high volume growth.
Okay, Mayuresh, the stock was up today over 1% in an otherwise weak market, so it was already expecting a fairly good set of earnings. With these internals, how do you expect the stock to perform tomorrow?
Evening, Reema. In terms of how the volume, specifically on the mobile data part, has panned out, I think very encouraging. Even the realizations in terms of ARPMs, much better than what the street was anticipating. So clearly, as Prakash was mentioning, the company had indicated in the quarter gone by that it will be focusing more on price hikes as opposed to being more aggressive on the subscriber addition part. So that is one aspect that is probably taking a positive impact in terms of how the voice is moved. In data, again, I think totally concur in terms of how the usage per subscriber has risen for Idea. It has actually risen from 148 MB in FY13 to 514 MB. And again, that trend is expected to increase. However, the average revenue per megabyte has declined sequentially, and I think that trend might continue with the Reliance Jio launch. So I think these aspects are very, very important to be noted in terms of how the data revenues will pan out for Idea. Yes, I think they've got largely compensated for kind of volume, but again, the volumes on the data front have disappointed if we do a peer check with what Bharti has done. And what this has probably done, again, in terms of their net debt to annualized EBITDA, is that has actually gone up, with both spectrum payouts expected to go up and the capex guidance that the management had revised to 7,500 for FY16 with accelerated 4G capex and the associated fiber rollout. I think even that might take a toll in terms of return ratio. So I think the management commentary on these aspects are going to be extremely crucial for Idea.
So tomorrow, the stock?
Again, I think the numbers were reasonably better, but again, the data volumes are a little bit on the softer and tepid side. So I think expecting a flat to positive start for Idea, but again, I think largely dependent on what the management comes out with.
Okay, unfortunately, this time the management is not interacting with the media, so they typically hold a press conference in the evening, so that is not there, and plus there are no interviews scheduled, so we won't know too much about, this volume versus price trade-off that clearly has taken place. But let's get Gaurang in. Gaurang, your expectation of how the stock will perform tomorrow? Gaurang? Okay, let me try.
Reema, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I was just trying to get your view on the stock performance tomorrow because it's already outperformed the market today.
Well, I guess it should definitely perform better because these numbers are much better than what the estimates were. Yes, as Mayuresh and Prakash were pointing out on the volume degrowth, that could be a little bit of concern. Let me give a disclosure over here and a prudence on my part that we do have a positive coverage on Bharti Airtel as well as Idea Cellular. Important to note over here is what are they going to do in terms of spectrum acquisition, because we saw Bharti going ahead and acquiring 8 and 6 circles. So if there is any need to grow over there, and the true reasons as to why this volume degrowth has come and how are they going to answer that or resolve that. Given the kind of digital India and of course the penetration that lies ahead, I'm quite sure stronger players in the cellular service provider sector will definitely do well. The only lingering worry in the short to medium term is the big launch in form of Reliance Jio.
Okay, and Prakash, your expectation from the stock and the target that you would put at Idea Cellular?
See, so Reema, very clearly, because of the worries on margins, relatively and on an absolute terms, both vis-a-vis Bharti, Idea should see some profit booking. It's seen a very nice run-up in the last 2 weeks, as I said earlier. And that would be an opportunity to understand this game plan going forward and invest for the long term. My medium-term target, which would span over the next 6 months, 3 to 6 months for Idea is about 150 plus. So very clearly there would be an upside, but tomorrow you could see a little bit of profit booking in the stock because of this kind of disappointment on the margins.
Mayuresh, when you work on the numbers now for F517, what would you expect by way of pricing for Idea in F517? Do you believe that this quarter marks a trend reversal? And would you moderate your volume expectations now, both on voice as well as data, when you work on the expectations now for F517?
Again, Rima, it's going to be largely how the tariff expectations will pan out.
So what will your tariff expectations be now? Based on what we've seen?
You need stability to come through. I think one quarter's numbers will not be testimony to the fact that Idea will keep on producing consistent numbers. With the RMS share taking predominance in terms of SMS at this point of time, my own take is that anywhere between 32 to 33 in terms of ARPMs, at least on the voice side. And as I mentioned on the data part, they've actually done realizations of close to 21 odd paise in the quarter gone by. So again, I think that might have some amount of sequential downside with Reliance Jio launch. So I think that figure of 21 again might be.
Well, the data realizations are at 22.9. It's improved from 22.3. So it's actually gone up by 2.7%, Mayuresh. The data.
But whether that exactly, that's the whole point, Deva. I think
so
that will be sustainable. That will be sustainable going forward once Reliance Jio comes out with its aggressive plans, and if one really assumes that to happen, that can come under pressure. So I think the offsetting effect will be if the volumes increase, but the volumes are not increased this time around, specifically on the data part. So I think that is going to be a very, very tricky proposition. So one really needs to understand stability in numbers coming through, volumes increasing at a decent pace. If the data revenue, if the average revenue per megabyte is expected to come down, I think that should get compensated with larger volumes, at least on the data front.
Okay, this is a rapid fire question for all three of you, and let me start with Prakash. If you had to pick one telecom stock, Bharti or Idea, which one would it be now that both the numbers are out?
Idea, it would be Idea.
Okay. Gaurang, same question to you?
Well, Rima, we have coverage on both, so I'll go 50-50.
Okay, so buy both the telecom names. And Mayuresh?
I'll prefer Idea on declines.
Okay, so it looks like Idea has more takers than Bharti. But if you had to compare the two numbers, Bharti as well as Idea, Prakash, which one do you think has delivered a better performance? Because it's both of them have managed to beat expectations on margins as well as on profitability. So that is there in both the companies. But Bharti on one hand is focused on volumes and their realizations have remained under pressure. But Idea on the other hand has focused on pricing improvement and discipline, and their volumes are significantly weaker. So which one is a better strategy in times like given the market dynamics?
No, absolutely. So, given the overhang of the Rel Jio launch, which is more of a factor that's governing these strategic moves by both, Bharti would be an aggressive fighter, whereas Idea is somebody who would not want to kind of bleed just to grow or just to compete. So I prefer something like that, and it's not yet run up and valuation wise it's much more reasonable as compared to Bharti currently. So definitely Idea, though while Bharti numbers were very impressive, sounded very nice, but I really don't think I would still go with Bharti, because there would be more blood that it would have to let off once it competes on pricing. It may not be able to price itself well while volumes have grown, whereas Idea has done the right things and timely so.
Okay, Mayuresh, which one is a better strategy with the impending Jio launch? Should one focus on volumes or should one focus on pricing?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, with the Reliance Jio launch, Bharti has done enough in terms of ammunition of acquiring spectrum, and that has shored up its ammo for countering Reliance Jio if the launch and when the launch probably happens. Idea, as Prakash was mentioning, a little bit more conservative on that aspect, and though they have acquired spectrum a couple of quarters back, they're going to take it quite easily. I mean, they're not going to be very, very aggressive on that front. So volume growth, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be extremely key, because if Reliance Jio comes out with aggressive pricing, the data revenues, specifically on the average revenue per megabyte, is expected to come down. If that comes down, it has to get compensated by volume. Bharti might be able to comprehend that much better. But again, I think Idea, as Prakash was mentioning as well, I think the valuations look extremely attractive at this point of time. And though the net debt to analyze EBITDA has probably moved up based on both factors in terms of expected spectrum payouts and the 4G fiber rollouts that they're probably doing at this point of time, my own take is that stability in numbers is more important at this point of time. So the next quarter's numbers, if they are equally robust and stable, specifically on the voice front, and if the management is able to guide for better data volumes going ahead over the next few quarters, I think that will give more confidence. So I think Idea looks a better choice at this point of time purely on these factors, but I think you need to wait for next quarter's numbers to come through for consistency and stability that one can really project into your analysis going forward in FY17.
Okay, gentlemen, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining in. So after Bharti, it's Idea which has come out with its earnings. Largely, it's a beat compared to street expectations. Revenue growth 5.2%, margins up by 340 basis points to 38.1%. That's the biggest beat, and that is driving an improvement in the profitability as well. Profits are down 24% year on year, but compared to expectations, it's a beat of close to about 10%. The story in Idea is that the company is focused on pricing. So voice pricing after 6 quarters of a decline has shown an improvement of 4.7%, and data pricing too, or realizations after 4 quarters of a decline, have reported an improvement of 2.7%. But the volumes are lackluster, significantly lower than the kind of volume growth that Idea has been reporting, and it's also lower than what its peer Bharti has reported. The stock outperformed today in a market which is down 1.7%. The stock was up 1.2%. So I think the street was already partly expecting good earnings, but on the headline numbers, it's a beat, and that maybe would drive some EPS upside in the stock. But the street will want to know about the company's strategy, and they will worry a bit about the volume moderation that we've seen, and if that sustains, then it's not going to, then perhaps the revenue growth may not hold up at a time when there is a lot of competitive pressure and a fight for market share. With that, it's time to slip into a very short break. We'll come back with more analysis.